Okay, this video is going to go through your 8.1 individual quiz, both the edge elastic part and the paper pencil part. Okay, so I'm going to start with the edge elastic, and I know it's kind of small. Question 1 says, given the graph below, write a possible equation of the polynomial in factored form. So remember, I can take a look and I can see where does this graph touch at x equals 4, bounce at x equals 1, and remember, if it's a bounce, it counts as two different factors. And then here, -1, 2, 3, x equals -3. Those are my zeros, my solutions, my x-intercepts. But the factors happen when I swing these over to the other side. Okay, so x minus 4, x minus 1, x minus 1, and x plus 3. Okay, so the answer for number 1 needed to include you dragging and dropping an x minus 4, 2 x minus 1s, and then 1 x plus 3. Remember, the other way to write it when you have two of the same factor is to write it with a squared. Okay, but in this question, if you took this online, there was no way to write it or to put squared, so you had to use x minus 1 twice. That's going to be really important on next week's test, is to make sure you know how to handle a bounce. Okay, question number 2 just says select the correct graph for the given equation. And honestly, you could type the equation into your y equals in your calculator and see which one matches up. But you don't absolutely need to do that. I see that there's a negative in front. That pen, of course, is dying. Okay, and with a negative in front, it means there's a negative orientation. That means in the right side, it's got to go down. So it could be this one. That one's a positive orientation, so there's no way that's correct. Ooh, that's going to be bleeding through. This is a positive orientation, so there's no way that's correct. This one's also negative. So it's either A or D. And the way I can tell is this x means that there's an x equals 0. This means that there's going to be an x equals positive 3. And this means there's going to be x equals -2. So I see a 0, a positive 3, and a -2. On this one, I see a 0, a positive 2, and a -3. That's how I know A is my best choice. Okay? And on the back, of course, my blue marker leaked through. Okay, so we're going to try and ignore these blue things. I apologize for that. Number 3 says write a possible equation if the zeros are x equals -4, x equals -1, x equals 3. So remember, in order to write an equation, you just flip it to the other side, x plus 4, x plus 1, x minus 3. So the factors are opposite of the zeros. And what you're seeing on a graph are the zeros. So question number 4, identify all the zeros. We're just saying, what do you see? Okay, well, I can see it's crossing at -4. I can see it's crossing here and here, so -1 and 0. Identify all the zeros. And I can see that it's crossing at 2. So on my key, I forgot to even bubble that part in. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I can see 4 of them that are crossing. Okay? Finally, well, not finally, question 5, a function is shown. Oh, you had to graph where the x-intercepts are. And you had to notice that with the x here, that would be at 0. X minus 1 means it would be at 1. And x plus 3 would be at -3. Remember, you could technically set each part equal to 0 and solve. But most of you can do this in your head. Okay, to get those 3 answers, and that's where it crossed the x-axis. Number 6 asked you to decide for a bunch of different graphs whether the orientation was positive or negative. Okay, so again, we're only looking at that right side of the graph. If the right side of the graph is going down, it has a negative orientation. If the right side of the graph is going up, it has a positive orientation. Okay, then we've got another graph here. Again, the right side only. That's down, so it's negative. That's up, so it's positive. Orientation only depends on the right side of the graph. And then the last question on this quiz, I believe, maybe there's one more. Nope, this is the last one. Number 7 says to identify all of the zeros again. So we're just looking at each part. This is a 3. So if I set 3 equal to 0, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't help me find any solutions. But if I do x minus 2 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, x minus 4 equals 0, I can find that x is positive 2, negative 1, and positive 4. Those are my zeros of the function. Okay. Now, moving on to the paper pencil part. There were lots of versions of this, okay? So I want to talk about just in general how we do it. And I will use this example or this version, okay? We're looking at this graph, and what we're seeing on this graph, first what we need to pay attention to is the x-axis. And I can see at negative 1, there's actually a bounce. At 0, it goes through, and at 3, there is a bounce. So my base equation for this graph, let's see if we can see both at once. My base equation is going to be y equals, I'm going to leave a space here for an a, or I'll just write in the a. X, now if I see it cross at negative 1, I have to put x plus 1. And because there's a bounce, I put squared here. Or you could write it twice. Then it goes through 0, so I would just have a plain x or an x minus 0. And then I would have an x minus 3, again squared because of the bounce. Okay, you're going to have to deal with the bounce on your test next week. Now, whatever extra ordered pair they give you is telling you an x value and a y value. And so all I'm going to do is leave this a here. A lot of you are going to see that this is negative and you're going to want to make this negative. Please don't make it negative in your algebra. Okay, a lot of you missed points on that the first round through. Do not make the a negative. Let the algebra find the negative for you. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to put 10 in instead of y. I don't know the a, and every time I see an x, I'm going to plug in negative 2, or whatever your ordered pair was. Okay, if your ordered pair was something different, then your math would be something different and your a value would be different. Okay, now I'm just going to follow the order of operations. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. Negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5. And now I'm going to square the parts that ask me to square. Okay, so I'm going to get positive 1, negative 2, and positive 25. Whoops, positive 25. And then I'm going to multiply these three numbers together, 1, 2, and 25, but the 2 is negative. So here's where my negative is going to come in. 50, negative 50, a. And so this is multiplication. To undo multiplication, I want to divide. So I get negative 10 over 50, or 1/5, or 0.2, any of those work, is my a value. So my final solution is y equals negative 1/5 x plus 1 squared times x minus 3 squared. A lot of people would prefer to write it with the x in front. That's fine. Okay, either of those two would be just fine. What's important is that you can write the base equation and that you can let the algebra find the a even if it's negative. Okay. Number 2 on your paper pencil, again, there were lots of versions, so you're going to see a lot of work here. I have a whole nother page of a lot of work. It's the same idea, but you're not looking at a graph. Okay, it's telling you a degree 4, positive orientation. The roots are super important. Roots at negative 1, 1, and 4. Okay, so my equation, if they tell me my roots are at negative 1, 1, and 4, that's going to give me an x plus 1, an x minus 1, and an x minus 4. And so far I should be thinking, wait a minute, there's a problem because they told me it was a degree of 4 and I only have 3. But let's keep looking. Then it says it bounces at x equals negative 1. So this was x equals negative 1. Here's what the bounce should be. Okay. Then it tells me it passes through the point of 2, negative 54. And remember, that just represents x and y. That means it wants me to find a stretch factor. So y equals a times those factors. And I'm going to put negative 54 in for y. I don't know the a. 2 is going to go in for x every time I see an x. Follow the order of operations by doing what's inside the parentheses first, and then square. So 9 times 1 times negative 2. So that's going to make a negative 18. And again, I didn't put any positive or negative here because I want the algebra to do the work for me. Now when I divide both sides by 54 divided by 18, technically it's negative 54 divided by negative 18, I do get 3. So my final answer is y equals 3 times x plus 1 squared, x minus 1, x minus 4. Okay, and that is my exact equation.